All right, good evening. Welcome to the Township Board of Trustees meeting for October 23rd. Mr. Guzak, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, look for a motion for approval of the consent.
So moved.
The consent agenda and the regular agenda. Both, Mr. Mansour?
Both.
Okay. Support. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? With that, we'll move on to our privileged presentation. And Mr. Limita, would you like to?
Sure. For those of you who haven't met Mr. Bucko yet, he's basically our broker for our liability or property and casualty insurance. He asked to come and address the board. He's got some, what I think will be good news for us in regards to what kind of renewal rates we're looking at, the dividend, and with that having been said.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, good to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Oh, there you go.
Thanks.
Well, hi, my name is Bob Bucko with the Stevenson Company, and we've handled the city's property and liability insurance for the last 25 years with the Michigan Township Participating Plan. I want to thank the board and superintendent for helping me and helping get my job to be done a lot easier. Over the last 4.5, 5 years, the loss history has improved greatly, and we are now entering our 4th year of rate reductions for the township. Besides just the typical insurance coverage that we provide to the township, I wanted to go over to this easel for a second. And you can go ahead and laugh at my artwork all you want. But what I wanted to explain is there's different ways that we provide liability coverage, whether it would be a pool, the Michigan Township Participating Plan, or the standard insurance carriers. Up until about 1983, when we had the last insurance crisis, most of the insurance policies were written like this. You had an underlying areas of coverage. The township has 5 of them. Your general liability coverage, which is your operations, your EPLI coverage, which is your employment practices liability, your errors and omissions coverage, your law enforcement liability, and your vehicle liability. Up until that time, all these coverages were written at a primary basis of $1 million with what we call an umbrella over and above it. I use the $4 million umbrella because it gives us a total of $5 million that the township has right now. At that time, you would have a $1 million primary with a $4 million excess to give you a $5 million occurrence. And usually with these umbrellas, the policy had an aggregate of $5 million. So the most that they would pay for any one occurrence would be $5 million. And also the most they'd pay any policy period would be $5 million. We thought this wasn't very good. In 1983, the Michigan Municipal League was started. They went around this a little differently. They provided one policy with one limit of coverage, $5 million. And that $5 million incorporated all those 5 limits of coverage. So it combined them all under one policy. The problem with that is it gave us a $1 million per occurrence, which was good. It also gave unlimited policy aggregate. So no matter how many claims you had $5 million per occurrence with an unlimited aggregate. So there wasn't any restrictions on the amount that the insurance company would pay for your claims. Problem with the Michigan Municipal League is they had one combined limit rather than 5, and the defense cost reduced your limit of liability. What we did in 1984 was a little different. We provided what we call 5 limits of liability. In this case for the township, each one carries a $5 million limit of coverage. Whoa, I knew this was going to happen. Each one carries its own $5 million limit of coverage. And also with our program, it provides an unlimited policy aggregate for each one of these. each one of these carries its own $5 million limit of coverage, and each has its own unlimited aggregate. So you can see that we can pay more than what people think of having a $5 million limit for the township. We can have a situation where we can have one claim where it includes your vehicle liability, it can include your law enforcement, and as a board, it could also provide coverage for yourself as a board member. Thank you so much. We can see that we have an enormous amount more coverage than the typical insurance policy. Each one of these has its own limit, and every time you have a claim, your policy renews itself with another limit of coverage. Also with our program, the defense coverage is outside the limit of coverage, so all the limit that goes towards the judgment is from your $5 million worth of coverage here. Now, why I talked about the policy aggregate. There's a community not too far from here. They're a client of mine. They have a serious claim right now. It's probably been going on for about 7 or 8 months. It's probably going to go on for 5 or 6 more months. If they lose, they're going to pay the full policy limit that they have. It's $4 million if they lose. Now, if they would have had a standard insurance policy that you find today with a policy aggregate, they would not have any more coverage for any other claims that may arise. They would have to go back into the marketplace and try to find more coverage. That is literally almost impossible when you have hanging over your head a catastrophe loss like they're experiencing right now. But with our program, any next liability coverage that they have is automatically read up to the $4 million worth of coverage. So that's the difference. So you can see that the Parkland is much broader coverage. To go over through the proposal, you have again 5 different limits of liability coverage. Each one has its own $5 million limit per occurrence. I just want to go over some of the highlights of the program. We included liquor liability in the policy this year, just to be on the safe side. A lot of our organizations do fundraisers where they have beer and wine or beer. We just added the coverage into the policy this year. Sexual abuse and molestation is up to the policy limits as well. Under your wrongful acts coverage, we are very unique in this area. Again, a $5 million limit of coverage, and we provide full coverage for zoning and temporary takings. There isn't a carrier out there that extends coverage for the full policy limits for this type of coverage. And we're seeing growth in townships. We're not seeing them in cities. We're seeing all the growth now in townships. Your employment practices liability each has its own $5 million limit of coverage, and extremely broad coverage as well. Another area of coverage we added to, and I think I'll probably talk to the agent who handles the Parks and Rec department, the Parks and Rec department, as a volunteer accident medical policy. Your volunteers are very important to the community. They're not covered by workers' compensation. And what we did this year is added a policy for them to provide coverage for $100,000 per individual in the event that they are injured while volunteering their time for the township. It's $0 deductible, first dollar coverage. We all have co-pays or deductibles. This will step in and pay first dollar up to $100,000 for their injuries. Law enforcement liability coverage, again, has a $5 million limit of coverage, and it automatically renews itself after every claim. So each individual claim has a $5 million limit of coverage. Now, if we have a situation where we could have cross liability, where there could be a police chase, where it involves the vehicle liability, as well as the law enforcement, you can have as much as $10 million sitting out there in coverage for yourself, for the township. Vehicle liability, $5 million again, and we have comprehensive coverage of $1,000 and $2,000 on your collision coverage. Your property coverages are all on a replacement cost basis. All your building and contents, we have just over $30 million in property coverage. It includes boiler machinery coverage to the full policy limit. And it also includes a coverage we call ordinance and law. In the event of a catastrophic claim and you have to make improvements to an existing building as a result of ordinances that have gone into effect since the building has been built, we'll pay for those improvements over and above the replacement cost coverage. Yes?
What's the coverage, Mr. Bucko, on documents, important papers, like we're going to document storage, a digital document storage system? What kind of coverage do we have?
$1 million of the coverage value of papers? Yes, $1 million. Yeah. Crime coverage, everybody is bonded under the policy. I don't care if you're an employee, public official, volunteer, you have a $100,000 bond. You also have money coverage on site of $100,000 and off-site for $100,000. And we've also increased that to $250,000 during a tax period. Over and above your property, your real and your personal property, we have scheduled and unscheduled property, just under $1.5 million. We provide coverage for your computers and your computer software, tractors, plows, the antenna, trailers, all kind of miscellaneous radio equipment, police equipment, and also we have a thing called contractor equipment rented from others. So a lot of times our townships are renting equipment for special needs. We automatically provide coverage for that. And many times we have provided certificates to the various rental companies. The coverage is automatic, but they'll like to get a certificate verifying coverage. We automatically give the coverage. And lastly is the nice premium there. It's just at $112,000, and we're expecting a 4% dividend this year. So you can see where that's going to be issued probably in the month of February. Now, some of the good ideas, or some of the highlights of the park plan include the program is controlled by its members. And what I mean is it's run by and overseen by township officials voted by the membership. We have 1,700 members. If you added up all the other members of the Michigan Municipal League, the Michigan Municipal Management Authority, and all the other insurance companies operating in the state, added them all together, they wouldn't even hit half of the members we have. Our newest member is the Metro Police Authority of Genesee County. They just signed up this year. Our offices and the insurance company is in Auburn Hills, Michigan. We employ 125 people there. Those are underwriters, adjusters, risk control specialists. And we also have fire EMS committees made up of local fire departments and EMS with our attorneys, as well as police committees, again made up of our attorneys and also police chiefs throughout the state of Michigan to keep abreast with changing things in the law. And of course, the PAR plan is not a pool. The insurance company is U.S. Specialty Insurance with an A+ rating. Highest rating available, actually, it's an A+ 15. So.
Question?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Sure, Mr. Massey.
You say after each claim, you said the policy is renewed,
The limits renew themselves.
the limit.
The limit renews itself. Right.
What
So
do you
every
mean?
claim you have, you're going to have up to $5 million per section to pay for that claim.
Okay, so. it
Yes,
renews.
there's not an aggregate.
Oh,
So your limit will never, ever decrease per claim.
okay.
Mr. Mansor?
Mr. Bucko, on the page that says, Section 7, real and personal property.
Yes.
Item A, blanket building and personal property, $30,182,740.
Yes.
How was that determined?
We did appraisals of those years back. I think it was about 4 or 5 years ago. And then we update them based on our computer and cost of living and everything else like that.
So that is like this building
Yes.
and
The police
structures,
department and all the other buildings.
water
we have.
tower?
Water tower, the building, the training tower right here.
It's both water towers, not just.
Yes, right.
Oh, several.
Oh, yes.
What about personal property? What's our limit for personal?
It's included in the $30 million.
Is that okay?
Yes.
So how does that compare to the $5 million per?
Your $5 million is for liability coverage. This is just your property coverage.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bucko, what Do we have any property that's in a flood area that would require, I don't know whether,
Last time we checked it, we didn't see any.
okay,
Yeah, there were none in there.
all right.
We don't have a restriction on that anyways.
Does the policy cover underground facilities?
Yes, it does.
So
yes, it
what
does.
about any kind
Underground?
of pipe underground?
Yes,
It does cover that
it
as
does.
well?
Yes, we pay for some of that. Yes, we do.
Okay. What would you say, I'm not real familiar with municipal insurance policies, but what would you say would be the most frequent cause of loss amongst municipalities? What's, you know, if we rank the claims in terms of frequency, what kinds of things are the most common?
Well, we insure quite a few housing commissions, so we have fires there.
Okay.
Usually with township government, you're seeing an uptick recently in zoning, but the most area we see most claims at is in employment practices liability.
Okay.
We see more areas in that than any other area.
So with general liability, it's the employment practices liability.
Yes, we
covers
see more of that, and that usually has the highest potential judgment
Right.
against it because of the allegations. Yes.
And we're covered for that.
Yes.
Anything with regard to the new marijuana law, if it passes, anything that the insurance,
I don't, if it goes through your normal channels, yep, there's not a problem.
all right,
Yes.
We just acquired new property behind us, and of course, that's covered also, right?
Yes, automatic
Because
coverage.
Right now, there is, well, they're boarded up, but if someone gets in there and gets hurt or whatever.
Absolutely.
We're still covered, right?
Yes, absolutely.
are there any areas where you think that we're deficient, that we're not?
We're looking at the area of cyber liability. It's a new coverage. I would think that for a township of this size, the premiums will be somewhere between probably $7,000 and $8,000. It's a new coverage, and it's hard to picture a premium because there hasn't been a lot of losses. Because a lot of people haven't bought it yet. So the industry hasn't seen losses to gauge with the premiums. So right now, I would think that the premiums are probably a little bit on the higher side until there's some type of experience. But very few have gotten cyber liability coverage because of the cost. But that might be something you want to look into.
Mr. Thomas?
Going back to the host liquor liability and the liquor liability
Yeah.
coverage, we're involved in a joint agreement, a joint ownership of our Parks and Rec Commission, and we're with the city, Grand Blanc City, us, and our school system. And the three entities form our Parks and Rec Commission. That includes also our senior center. And in a few instances that there is alcohol served at our senior center. Would that be covered under this?
If the township is joined in that lawsuit, we would cover you. Yes, absolutely. We had that situation with a Friday night surprise a couple years back with the run. It was a 5K run, a beer run. And Dennis called me up and said, what do we do here? I said, don't worry, it's already covered. Yeah.
And then we've also got joint property on the library, the Grand Blanc Library.
Yeah.
I think that's part of our property.
Yes, it is. Correct, it is.
Does the city have to have their own coverage for their half, or how does that work, or?
I think we have the policy, we have the coverage, and then I don't know if you send them a
If there was a
bill.
loss, do you cover half the property?
Oh, no, we got, well,
Because you had double coverage if both the city and the township are covering the same building, right? So since we only.
didn't you have a pro rata? We pay 50/50, depending on the
I don't know,
amount of
I'm just
percent of
asking.
ownership.
Is
Yeah,
that-
yeah, that's how it would work.
You can only collect up to what you have ownership of.
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
As far as, Mr. Bucko, with regard to, I'm familiar with commercial entities and co-insurance. And also, you know, if we have a claim and they come in and they say, hey, you guys are underinsured,
Guaranteed replacement cost, agreed amount.
okay, so it is agreed
Yes,
value.
we make a mistake, we're eating it.
Okay, so agreed value on it.
Yes, it is.
Okay. What that basically means is that we agree that 30 million is the limit, and
If it's
If we find
34,
out
after a
it's-
tornado goes through, we're paying 34. We're paying for 34, yep.
any other questions for Mr. Bucko? Mr. Limita?
We had a decrease in premium again this year. I think this is the fourth year in a row, Bob, that, I mean, we were like about at 140, we're down to 112. And we're talking significant dollars here, about
Yes.
$30,000 less in
Right.
premiums. I just want the board to be aware of that. We've looked at it every year and we've seen a decrease in premiums.
And we should have a 4% dividend too on top of that to deliver the check.
How is our loss?
It's been very good over the last 5 years. It's gotten much better. You're making my job a lot easier. It's a lot easier for me to fight on your behalf of the underwriters when I have a loss history like this.
Was it general liability claims or what?
We
Property.
had some cases with the police back then. We also had some general liability, but it was a little bit of everything.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
So-
hats off to our
yeah.
department.
Thanks. Hey, right here.
Well-
Here's the reasons why it's improved.
Well, we've got great department heads.
Yes.
two of
Oh,
us
also
are
want to
sitting here,
mention
and our-
that
Our superintendent as well.
that we had our risk control specialist come out here and he spent, I think, a couple days. I have, want to thank not only the board and Dennis and his staff, but all the other departments. I have never seen a more glowing report from our risk control specialist than I saw after he came and spent the day and a half or 2 days with the township. So it made my job a lot easier.
Very good. I'm glad to hear that. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Bob, what kind of question, what does the risk control look for?
Policy and procedures, making sure they're followed. In zoning areas, they make sure that there's findings of fact. There's all different things, primarily policies and procedures and making sure that there's systems in place, that they're followed. They also go through and look at all your physical assets and make sure that they're in good shape. But primarily, we're looking for more on the liability side, and policy and procedures are a big item that we look at.
Did you find any discrepancies?
No, we didn't. We did not. No, not at all. I think there was minor recommendations, but nothing serious, and we've been doing a very good job here. Matter of fact, they gave me some recommendations to change some of the things, so I did those.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Bucko. I think that,
Thank you.
I appreciate the explanation too.
Thank you.
That helps.
Thank you very much. You can laugh at my artwork all you want.
No, that's fine.
Thank you.
Thanks. With that, we will move along to our citizen comment. And good evening, Mr. Erb.
Good evening, Enter 721 Two-Quarter Road. I just want to bring up two items here. I listened to the DPW director's presentation for his budget. And again, this has come up in the past, and I'm kind of dittoing what I've said in many years. 7% water loss. And it just seems to be acceptable to, can't find it, okay? I don't think it's acceptable. I think we should always be working on that water loss. That's a lot of dollars. When you talk think about how much water you buy, and 7% of those, that in dollars, how much money that is. It's astronomical. I know it's difficult to find, but, you know, where is it? Where's the loss? I know we brought up the fire department uses water. Okay, we want to call that a loss, it's a loss. There's theft. We don't know how much water was stolen. We ought to try and find out how much was stolen. We had a leaky pipe many years ago, a valve that was turned on wrong, and we were giving water to another municipality at one time. So we should constantly be looking for this and to get it better, because we do say we're a premier community. Well, let's act like one. Let's find that loss.
Good point.
And on to snow plowing. That always comes up during the DPW director's budget. We're not in charge of roads. We're not in charge of snow plowing. I don't think that snow plow should be part of their budget. It should be part of the general fund budget. And it should go on that line item for snow plowing. Let the residents know what they pay for snow plowing. When you
It's in
start
there.
figuring the cost of them trucks. So, you know, I don't want to belabor that, but we're not in charge of snow plowing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. And not that I want to add to the agenda, but that is out of the general fund, so, in fact, I asked Mr. Sears that question. Mr. Limita?
I can address 2 points. 7% water loss is less than half of industry average, so we're actually
Okay.
way better than the industry average. The other
And we
thing
are
is
looking
that
for-
snow plowing is absolutely in the general fund budget.
And we are continually looking for that loss. I mean, it isn't, in fact, our SCADA system and all these, metering, what have you,
Yeah, we have purchased new
We're-
systems to help
we're
us.
constantly vigilant for that. But you're right. I'd love to see it down to 0, but I don't, and we'll keep shooting for that. But thank you very much for your concerns. I appreciate those. Yes?
Superintendent Limita, did you say the average for municipalities is 14% loss?
It's probably more than that, actually. You have to understand that when you look at the industry average, there's still a lot of places that have wooden pipes in the ground, water mains, and so that water loss, just from that alone about the leaking, and we're, with our SCADA system and everything, we get alerted when something goes on, but you have water main breaks. There are so many aging systems out there across the country. Trustee Thomas, there's a really good documentary on PBS that you can look up, and you will be astounded at what you see. And I mean, there's still some wooden water pipes that are affiliated with Detroit Water System.
The GLEWA.
GLEWA. So, I
GLEWA
mean,
has wooden pipes.
it's out there, and there's just tremendous amount of water loss.
Yeah. Well, and also, Mr. Limita, one of the things that, we talk about water, but sewer is part of this too. And the infiltration into our system, whenever it rains, we pay for all that to be treated, whether it's sewage or rainwater that infiltrates the sewage system. And we have probably quite a few homes that have their sump pumps connected to the sanitary sewer, which is not allowed, but it also causes us more cost when it comes to processing sewage, because now instead of, X number of gallons, we have 2X, whenever it storms. So there's some other areas where if we really want to save money, that, the sewage, that infiltration, but it's a matter of, how much resources we devote towards those, and I think, we try to balance that out of how much of that, what is it, I they call it, and the infiltration into the system, but that's equally as important, I think, probably as the water loss. And so it's something we're continually battling, and also why we have capital projects is to try and correct some of that. Mr.
Yes,
Guzet?
in reference to the sewers like that with the sump pumps, we did have a grant, we did have a bond out there a few years back, and we're still, I think we just paid it off, but that went into subdivisions and corrected a lot of that stuff, because we did correct a lot of it 2 or 3 years back. Well, actually, it was more than 3 years back, but we had a special assessment bond on that, and it wasn't, we were paying for it, not the residents, at a low interest rate, and that helped us as far as, and that got us down lower to where we're at now, so I'm sure that helped quite a bit, but we
The
did.
problem, I believe the problem with us doing it, though, is that what's required of us when we do it, at least from what I've heard in the past, is it's tremendously expensive for us to do it. And I don't know, Mr. Laddie, if,
But that was part of the grant that Earl was talking about. We qualified for it, and it was a pretty intensive program. We actually had people going door to door. We had a lot of informational items. We had a lot of people, we actually had technicians in basements making sure that there weren't violations. And it all, not only did it help our rate overall, but also the county had reached a phase where they were going to surcharge storm events. If they, if we sent them an extra large amount of product after a storm, they were going to add a certain premium onto the rate. And our participation in that program saved us from any of those fees. And it was pretty successful. But as Mr. Earp pointed out and Mr. Bennett pointed out, it's an ongoing struggle.
Yeah.
And we keep trying to find ways to solve it as best we can.
okay, moving on to operational issues, and Mr. Lemata, I'd like to discuss the general fund and special revenue fund budgets.
Sure, we've had the opportunity to go through, and we did a little bit of more detail in police and DPW, and you guys have had the opportunity to look at it. But in my narrative, I brought up a couple of considerations that I think the board should consider. First and foremost, we were unsure previously about the 50/50, and And now we know that it has been budgeted at $185,657. Just see if the board's concurrence on that, if we are going to adjust the budget to increase that amount from the $60,000 we had budgeted to the 185. Obviously, that would be my recommendation, take as much advantage of the 50/50 funds as we can.
I need a motion.
You want motions on those?
Mr. Mansur?
I don't necessarily need a motion, but a consensus from the board to go ahead, because then we'll update and then we'll provide a new budget packet with some of the
That's when we
changes in
actually-
it.
So,
Yeah.
I think Mr. Mansur
yeah,
had a question.
so, Mr. Lehman, how much is that increase year over year? What would we have, for instance, last year? for that?
$60,000. I had $60,000 for many years in a row now.
Right.
So now we're basically adding 120, year
Right.
over year, it's $120,000 increase.
Correct.
Okay.
And as far as the setting of priorities for where that's going to go, is the road commission will be coming in to meet with Mr. Lemata and Mr. Sears. They have a list of suggestions of what they feel need to be done. I'm going to email to you a report that I received from the road commission showing the percentage of good roads and bad roads, what have you, in our township. You know, in most municipalities, it's not the major roads that are the issue, and so, and they're not under a county responsibility, the roads that are bad. So, anyways, this 180,000 will come in handy.
It's going to triple what we've been able to do for the past several years, so I think that makes a pretty good statement as far as from residents.
And they match it, right? I mean, they
Correct.
match it, so there's,
Well,
Mr. Thomas?
that's the
The
whole key.
185 match is what our share is 185.
Right.
We're matching their 185.
Right.
But
So you're gonna end up with, what, 360? But-
yeah, which is.
And you're
good.
figuring about $1 million per road mile.
Well, they said that 500,000, Director Sears last year made comment that if we put $500,000 into the roads, which would equate $1 million from, if it was 50/50 money, that our roads wouldn't improve, they would just remain the same as of right now. But I would ask, I know that we'll get a list from the road commission of projects that they deem, with the formula, are the major roads in the township that need to be fixed first and foremost.
They're gonna come with their recommendations for what they think that 360 ought to be spent on.
And I'm not sure who I direct this to, but probably you or Clerk Lane or Trustee Massey with Streets and Roads. I know that you guys have been working on this with your task force diligently. Have you come up with a list of what you think are the three of you?
What we're working on is whether or not, you know, what this board's policy is going to be with, I think anyways, with regard to water and putting
with the
that
water
in.
line.
I mean, as far as prioritizing which roads, I think, I wanna see what the road commission has to say as far as what their recommendations and their justification for that.
I am absolutely positively for the $185. If we're gonna vote on it or if it's gonna be a consent, I absolutely consent that we change the budget to reflect the 185 to match the 50/50 funds.
Mr.
So-
Mansur?
Yeah, so just a comment, last time we were going through the discussion on where to allocate funds, Superintendent Lehman had provided a list of projects. I think there were half a dozen of them or so, all of which combined, I don't think, totaled more than $120,000. So not that those are necessarily the right ones,
Right.
but we should have those in conjunction with whatever the county represents.
I think the list kinda reflected what we had money for, but,
Right.
Mr. Lemata?
It is, we put together a 3-year plan, so the 3-year road plan, as it gets together, that's with us sitting down with the road commission, talking about the Paisley ratings on all the local roads and where we could have the most impact. There's some where we have conversations about they're just too far gone, they need a complete redo, so we're trying to throw, at that point, $120,000 out of them annually. Those ones wouldn't have been on the list because you're looking at it saying, there's no bang for your buck at $120,000 on a road that's completely destroyed and needs to be completely done. So this will revise our 3-year plan. We'll put a new 3-year plan together with the additional funding, and I think that's gonna open up some more possibilities. We go through a long list and say, what's realistic that we can do over 3 years if this is the amount of money we have, and if there's more additional funds. So there will be more on that 3-year plan than what we have funding for. just in case we fell into a pot of money, or like last year when they,
Right.
Lansing pushed some additional road funding out, and it gives us an opportunity to grab and do something else. You guys will have that list. As we work through that list, it'll come back to the board on a 3-year plan, on a recommended 3-year plan that we agreed with from the road commission.
And I think it'd be helpful to have Mr. Pavandi, the new director, come to our meeting, and the board be able to ask him some questions too. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, when do you think we may have that list, or when you guys anticipate meeting with the road commission?
They anticipate meeting with us, I believe, before the end of this month, so it's gonna happen fairly quickly.
Correct.
So before the November 8th meeting, we'll have that information. Okay, Mr. Thomas?
So what we're gonna do is we're at the 185, we're just putting it up for the 50-50 match, and does anyone have an appetite to put more money into that for some of the smaller projects to, without the 50-50 match, to knock them out?
Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, I just, I mean, I think it's, for me, it's sufficient to basically pick up the matching funds. I mean, it already represents a 3-fold increase over what we had in there this time. And so going beyond that, I think there are probably some other priorities to look at. But in terms of this amount of money, do we have any sense of whether this is going to be a year, going to happen again year over year, or are we going to kind of deflect back down to the 60,000 range?
Mr. Lemata?
So our understanding is that this is a new way of looking at this from the road commission. I think it's a changing of the guard. Mr. Pavandi is the new manager director, and I think you're seeing he's trying to make a statement in the talk about the road commission is, number one, if you look at it from their standpoint, these are matching funds, so they're taking, it's not like they got a windfall in their budget. What they're doing with their budget is, instead of fixing the things that they can fix and then, you know, giving us 60,000 and we throw in 60,000, they're kind of getting the townships to throw some more money into the game. That's going to do overall obviously for the county road commission, they're going to be able to get more roads done in the county. But you know, from our standpoint, you know, yeah, it's kind of putting more on us, saying, look, you guys, we needed you to do a little bit more than 60,000. How about doing 185,000? We agree to do it, but I think the impact is well worth it. One of the number one things that we often hear is roads, 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 and this is a great response at 185.
And keep in mind, I know, you know, our previous board made a statement pretty clear that, you know, roads, while they're a concern for us, are not our issue. I mean, aren't under the purview of this board. They're under the county. And this money, you know, it's 50-50 money only because that's what they're requiring. I believe Mr. Laddie will tell you that the only time that we're required to pay half is when we're building a new road, right? I mean,
there is, that is arguable in the state statute, but I don't know if it's been tested in Genesee County, but
I asked that question of the director of the Department of Transportation for Michigan, for MDOT, but he wasn't familiar with that.
well,
So,
I think a lot of our, and this is a good thing for Grand Blanc, even though we've got overall funding problems in the state and the county. Grand Blanc, you guys have been fortunate to do a lot with the little that you have, and I think that formula is, however frustrating it can be, I think it actually in the long run ends up being a neutral for Grand Blanc Township, because you guys have always taken advantage of that funding when it's available, and you've always made the best of it. So I don't think we need to rock the boat, but somebody else might need to.
is anybody opposed to us putting that matching amount in? So it sounds like we have a consensus that we want to do that.
So there's a couple of other items that I would like the board to consider while we're looking at our general fund budget. The other one is McFarland Library, and we've had a lot of conversations recently about McFarland, and the board has appointed Clerk Lane to kind of get in there and assist them with starting to put together a little bit longer term strategic plan as far as capital projects needs goes, where we're going to ask them to put a 5-year plan together. And if you read the original articles of incorporation or the joint resolution, it actually said in there that when they present their budget to the board every year, that's supposed to include their 5-year capital plan. But I think that just got lost over the years, and I think it was probably when there was no money. I mean, we were hit the recession and there wasn't any capital dollars available, and so I think they just stopped turning it in, and we stopped expecting to see it turn in. So we're getting back to where we're supposed to be. We're getting back to what the joint resolution calls for, and that's going to be for them to submit that 5-year capital plan. It allows us to plan, obviously, much better to help make sure that that library is being taken care of like it should. But that having been said, we do a 60-40 split on the financing of maintenance for that library with the city. And you guys may want to consider, as long as the city would agree, to maintain that 60-40 split, to give them a little bit more money, because it sounds from what we're hearing from the library that there's quite a bit of deferred maintenance. We did the carpet last year. You guys approved to move forward with the HVAC system, but it sounds like there's some issues with the roof. I don't know exactly what that dollar amount is until we get that 5-year plan. But while you have the opportunity, and I'm not talking to double their budget here or anything, but should we consider giving them an additional even $5,000 or $6,000 to take care of some of the smaller deferred maintenance items? It might be worth, as long as the city maintains the 60-40 match, it might be worth consideration.
Mr. Thomas?
When we get to the library, do we own 60% of the physical building?
We own 50%.
We own 50%, but we're paying 60% of the,
Correct. That was an agreement that the city and the town made several years ago, and my hunch is that it reflects the possible usership of the library. In other words, there are more residents in the township, and therefore there's a skew to the percentage. I don't know that for sure, but it's been in place for quite a while.
when you say quite a while, are we talking
More than
45 years?
No,
like-
no. I'm thinking
Parks and
maybe
Rec.
15-ish. Not as long as
60-40.
some.
What are we paying for? How much was the HVAC that's part of their, wasn't that like in the roof? I heard numbers of anywhere from $500,000.
Well, that was if we had to replace the boilers, it was gonna
Yeah,
be
the
very
boilers.
expensive, because they'd probably have to pull them out through the roof. But they're not having to do that. I think, what is it, 50,000
it
we're
was
looking
about
It
at?
was $50,000 total, $20,000 the city committed, $30,000 for the
So
township
we
board.
have to pay 30,000 for the
And we're
HVAC.
absolutely okay with the 60-40 split?
For right now.
I think we are.
Yeah,
Well, yeah.
we got a few other things
So-
that
Oh,
we're
it beats
working
90-10.
on.
So I had a couple of questions. First, comment first, I think it's a great idea to get a 5-year budget out in front of us and try and get ahead of these maintenance issues, especially if there's some of the bigger ones coming up. The question about, that you raised about this,
About the what, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor?
the question, the issue that was raised about the funding of the replacement for their HVAC, did we actually ever specifically get a request from the Library Commission for $30,000? I mean, I saw the note that Bob sent, but it was kind of like, but we did get a specific request from them to us for that.
Yes.
We had the quotes too, we saw the quotes, right?
Okay.
In
Yeah.
an email,
Right.
because if they went to the city first and presented it and got it, and then after that, sent an email requesting that the township board would consider the $30,000.
Ms. Lane?
That happened at our last meeting, Mr. Mansour, and they are proceeding with getting more definitive answers from the person that's going to do the work.
I saw what was written there, and it was not a specific request. It was a mention of what the total was and what the proposed split was. That was what we saw at the last meeting. So that's why.
So you're talking our last meeting or their last meeting?
No, it was
We
my-
discussed it at our last meeting.
Right, and we agreed to
But we
pay the
approved.
30,000. Now they're finalizing everything when I went to the library board meeting.
And you can get us a
And-
copy of what's finalized on that, or?
When they have it finalized, absolutely.
Thank you, thank you.
Does that
Yep,
work, Mr.
that's-
Mansour?
That's fine.
Okay.
Mr.
Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, I just had a question. If we decide to put more money into their budget for capitals, can we earmark it and say it can't be used for anything else? It can't be used for, it should be for the future maintenance? And not, I mean, it's pretty hard to nail it down, but,
Well,
so
that's
that way
actually
we
the
go
only
right
thing
for
we
the roof
cover.
or go
Yeah,
to
we're only covering the maintenance of the building. We don't cover operations, that's funded by GDL. we're only, that 60/40 is just for the maintenance, so whatever
Right.
we do towards it is for the maintenance.
Right.
Like, we've had that long-term agreement where we were doing all of the snow plowing, and the
Right.
city does all the grass mowing, and, I mean, maybe what we should be doing, looking at the library as a cost center and saying, how much does it really cost us? Is it, $5,000 a year for snow plowing? Let's just give them the $5,000 and let them contract wherever they want to contract out and handle everything and get us out of the picture. Because we contracted to have somebody go out and plow the snow there rather than send our DPW last year, because I think they can do it for cheaper than it costs me to send the DPW over there to do it. I think we ought to be looking at the library as what's the right budget, what's the amount it costs them to mow the lawn, and let them contract with a mowing service. And we just do the 60/40 split between us and the city, and truly let them handle the maintenance of the building and grounds.
But if we do that, would the city still be able to send their DPW over there, or are we gonna restrict that, or?
Well,
Because they do certain stuff.
Well, we'll have to get an agreement with how we're gonna handle that, I guess, as far as grass mowing and who's gonna do it, and DPW. Mr. Massey in the
Yeah, I
next
have a
one.
question, I have a concern. When work is to be done at the library, how many estimates are required?
By us or by their board? Their board pretty much handles the
Whomever.
finances, so Ms. Lane, do they have a
Whomever.
policy on that?
I haven't seen a policy yet, but what I have seen when I was at the last meeting, it's things like utilities, painting the railings when you go in, they've kept it to a minimum because of the amount of money they receive. And so it's volunteers and,
No, it's not my question. My question, when work is to be done, we paying $30,000. Where are the estimates? That may make more sense.
Oh, there
Okay.
wasn't any, you're right, there wasn't any estimates this last time, it just was the contractor that was maintaining their furnace, and they went to them because they knew it the best. And I didn't see any other estimates, there was no bids at
Correct.
all.
Right. But we're kind of in a dire situation with it too, or with winter coming.
Right, yeah.
But in the future, I would hope, and Ms. Lane, and I'm sure you'd,
I don't think they have.
See
estimates
to
or
that,
quotes
but-
on things like that.
Right.
Mhm.
I assume it's
Thomas?
probably run like the Parks and Rec Commission, where they make the decisions and then they come to us with the bills. But,
No.
so how this came up, so Superintendent Limita, what you're saying is you'd like to put another 5, 10, just be aware that you would like to put more money,
Well, he's asking
$5,000 to
us.
$6,000 into their maintenance budget?
well, he's asking if we want to do that. They brought to us that they've got, maintenance issues and what have you, and
That-
and
we
we don't
wanna-
have a firm
But
handle on it yet.
what's your opinion and what do you want us to do?
you have any thoughts?
So, I mean, we don't have a firm handle on it yet, right? We're doing $40,000, or, we moved to $50,000. It's clearly, there's been a lot of deferred maintenance in that building. Us giving them another $5,000 doesn't solve everything, but what it does do is we're expanding that budget a little bit and expecting that they take care of some of the stuff that just obviously hasn't gotten done. And again, lack of funding, I guess. I mean, I don't know. We don't really have a handle. We're not controlling that thing. All we're doing is agreeing that we're gonna do 60/40 worth of maintenance, and that's where the 5-year plan is critical. We have to have that 5-year plan. If you wanna hold off on making any changes to the budget until we get the 5-year plan in our hand, that's fine. But I think once we get it, so that we can really get a look and have somebody definitively tell us, look, here's some things that are essential that have to be fixed, here's some things that are deferrable, but should, be done sometime in the next 6 years or something. I just know that we know that they haven't had the funds yet. And again, hard to say because we don't have the plan.
Well, the thing is, we don't, unlike the parks with the library, Mr. Thomas, it's purely all volunteer with regard to our portion of it, so for example, the expenditures, I mean, this board that we have for the McFarland Library is totally volunteer. And so it's kind of, my hat goes off to them for their just sticking with it. I mean, there's obviously been some long-term members that have been on that board probably 15, 20 years, I would guess. just putting their time, you know, taking care of the bills and making sure, and it's a beautiful library, but yeah, you know, they're out trying to raise money for it and what have you. So really, I want to be supportive of their efforts because they're volunteering their time. And it's, you know, a miracle that without much of our attention over the years that they've been able to keep the thing as good a shape as it is. So, you know, organizations I volunteer for, I don't expect them to turn into a full-time job, you know, and we shouldn't of these people either. Ms. Thomas?
In the past boards, have they come to the board and requested extra funds and we've said, no, we just can't afford it? Is that what happened?
Well, we're trying to get the relationship, and I think with Ms. Lane being on that board, the idea is to develop a relationship where there is more communication so that, you know, they volunteer their time on that board. They want to come to our board meeting in the city. They probably have limited time, but I think our hope is to develop a better communication route so that those kind of things are, you know, communicated.
Well, can I make a suggestion, and maybe Miss Lane or Superintendent Limina could do this? Maybe reach out to them, see if they could, you know, maybe have Director Sears go out there and give his, you know, professional opinion. And, you know, obviously, being a professional, you know, with the DPW, he can point something out structurally or something that really
We're actually,
needs to be
Ms.
changed.
Lane and Mr. Limita and I had discussion on that earlier today, and we're going to investigate having somebody take a look at it because they are trying to put together a 5-year capital improvement plan. But to do that, we need to have somebody professional look at things like the roof, the, you know, parking lot, all those types of capital expenditure or capital needs.
I'm all for it.
Okay, Mr.
Yeah, I thought we were.
You're all for what, Mr. Thomas?
I'm all for the extra
Giving some
funds.
extra,
I'm all in for giving the extra funds, which
like what, $5,000?
Superintendent Limita said $5,000. 5 to 10 grand, you said?
Historically, just for the board's reference, we were at 47,500 was our contribution for many, many years. In 2018, we bumped it to 50,000. We gave them an extra $2,500 for 2018. But that was after, I don't know how many years it was frozen at the 47.5.
Are we
And
talking
maybe-
15, 20 years type of thing? Or?
I think at least, I mean, in the,
At least 8 years.
yeah, before
10
the
years.
recession, I mean,
Right.
we've been kind of
10
locked at that amount. So even if we went to 55,000, just $5,000 difference, as long as the city will maintain the 60/40 increase, then I think that at least we're giving them enough money. Because I think we need to hire a commercial building inspector, a licensed
Sure, you
building
know
inspector
But they're
to go
different
out,
than that.
do the actual, where we're at, what do we need, and then, you know, have them, they can pay it if we're gonna bump the budget a little as they start working this thing together.
So we couldn't have our building inspector do that?
Of
Because
course,
I know
that's
we
not-
talked about that.
That's not what they do. I mean, we're
Alright.
asking guys to go out and do something that they don't do, and
So I would make a suggestion that we bump it up 10 grand. And then, if the projects come back, the 5-year plan and breaking it down, and if they need more maintenance money, then we can always increase it.
Mr. Chair,
Does that work?
Well,
I assume,
Mr. Massey?
I assume based on what you said, Superintendent, that actually we're gonna put a process in place. So, you need us tonight to agree on 55,000?
well, I wanted to make sure that we at least discussed it, and if you guys feel, at least, that you agree somewhat, then I want to have that conversation with the city as well to make sure that I mean, we're not going to move it if they don't move. We're not just going to put more money in if we don't maintain the 60/40.
So you're gonna talk to the
Mr.
city.
Mansour?
So what we're doing here tonight, if I'm not mistaken, is that we are asking the superintendent to put into the budget some level that we're recommending, because we're not approving money tonight.
Correct.
We are wanting to alter or to kind of change the budget proposal. And I guess the point I wanted to make is, and maybe Clerk Lane as a representative there, we can find out, but you know, the amount of money, extra money, 55,000 a year or 50, depending how we end up on this thing, it seems like it's a good deal for our residents. I mean, we have a significant population. The library is located in the city, but it's very convenient to get to for our residents. And we could probably find out specifically what the usage is. But again, on behalf of our residents, I think it's probably a good investment in keeping with the premier community, in keeping with technology, and having a central place for meetings as well, which I understand the McFarland Library is well used.
So it sounds like we're okay with somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000. And Mr. Lemon, you see what fits in the budget?
That's
I think
good,
we'll be
yeah.
good with that. And I think in the meantime, Ms. Lane and the library board will take a look at, you know, who's best equipped to do a survey of the building and see what, or an inspection of the property to see what actually is needed.
And then lastly, the last thing I asked the board on my transmittal out was just a conversation around the campus project fund. And one of the things that the board has done since we started the campus project fund that resulted in building the new police department is we've dedicated that 0.7 mils from our operating millage to the campus project fund. We refinanced those bonds in 2015, and with the new payment, and whereas our taxable value has grown, that 0.7 mils, if we continue to dedicate it, and that's what this budget is, the budget before you is predicated on that 0.7 mils being dedicated like we always have because it's been a board mandate. That would, we're gonna have almost $230,000 excess this year from above and beyond what we need to pay the bond principal and interest payment. So that extra $230,000 then will just go into the fund balance of the campus project fund, which currently has approximately $2.6 million. So it'd be $2.9 million. We just extrapolated it out to 2031. If we continue on the track that we're going, we would end up with over $7 million in that fund that isn't really earmarked for anything other than the campus project fund. So I just wanted the board to make sure that you guys are aware of it, that we're setting aside those 0.7 of a mil, and we have for a number of years, but it greatly exceeds what we need to pay our bond costs on, and that balance is going to continue to grow. I think that the board should at least consider utilizing those funds for something with a more immediate financial impact, like dedicating to pension or OPEB liabilities rather than allow it to grow in a fund, unless, of course, you're planning on building a new building in 2031 for the township office, and that's why you're setting aside that money.
Okay. Mr. Guzak?
Yeah, I think that was the intent, that was out there, because the original plan was they were gonna build a police building, and then build another, our building, in that other vacant area over there. So that's what we have to look at, and that's why it was set up. I think, you know, a small portion of it, or a portion of it could be used towards OPEB, but I think they still need to build some, because you even said yourself, we might not be here forever, so you're just trying to build up a down payment for whatever you're gonna be doing with it.
Mr. Thomas?
I thought that extra fund was gonna be used for a continuous improvement plan for the police, or, you know, after 25 years, we replace the roof with that extra money or whatever they needed at that building. But that's what I assumed. But can maybe Attorney Laddie or somebody give us a little history on where that money was supposed to be used for, or Clerk Lane?
Well,
Mr.
that's-
Laddie? Let Mr. Laddie reply.
Well, I can only talk to the 0.7 mils, and again, I think Ms. Lane has probably a recollection of this too, but my recollection was that 0.7 mils was an expiring, I think it was an expiring utility millage, maybe a sewer, maybe sewer and water
Sewer
or something
bond.
like that. And the idea was, when we entered into the obligation for the police building, which, and we also had a campus plan where we in phases, we were gonna do the police building, then we're gonna do this building as well in the space. The economy had other plans for us, but we had always decided, or it had always been decided by previous boards, to keep that 0.7 mils to represent our bond obligation for the police building at a minimum. And it turns out, again, we've got refinancing that happened that lowered our expected amortization of that. But that was my recollection of how that money got earmarked, really, and it was never officially, I mean, it's not legally bound to our general fund. It's not legally bound to be separated out. It was just a policy the boards had adopted to make sure we could always cover our bond payments. And
Ms.
with
Lane?
that, I'll of course defer
Yeah.
to anyone
Ms.
else's
Lane?
memory as well.
Mr. Laddie remembered properly. It was a 7/10 of a mil that we had from a sewer bond. And rather than just cut it off, we knew we needed a new police building. We had done all of the studying of it. We knew the square footage. And then, as Mr. Guzak indicated, we were going to have another building for ourselves and use this eventually for more DPW space as we grew, so.
So,
Mr. Mansour and then Mr. Gusak.
so the money that's accumulating here, I guess, you know, we have an immediate, basically mortgage, right, on the police building. So if we've been dedicating this money to it and we happen to be able to pay it down sooner, I mean, it would seem to me that we can, you know, kind of retire those bonds.
Can?
I'm not sure that we can prepay those bonds.
Yeah, well,
You can't?
No, we can't do that.
Yeah. Mr. Guzak?
Well, there is a time limit when you can refinance it, but some of those excess funds that we did accumulate, we not only refinanced it, but we paid some of that principal right towards it, okay? So we did, some of the stuff we did accumulate was put on that balance, plus when we refinanced the bond, some of the bond payments, the income stream sold off at a higher amount because there was a higher rate bond, and we gained more interest there too. So there was a lot of money between the down payment that we were building up that we applied, plus, I think it was over $1.5 million, I think overall. It was at
What
least-
years would this be?
What's that, the bond?
No, what Earl was just saying that we did all this. We paid.
Well, in 15, we did this, okay? There
So in
was,
15, we paid.
2015, we had the opportunity to refinance it, and there was the first opportunity we had, because now, you know, it has to go out like 10 years, I believe. So in 15, now you can't go until 20, okay? But no, 10 years, so it's gonna go to
25.
25. But we had the opportunity to refinance it because the rates are so much better, and we did. And we had some of that 7/10 money that we applied towards it, which reduced it down. We didn't use all those funds because we thought we'd want to keep some in there just in case, because the campus fund was for anything on the campus. It's this building, it's a police building, it's, you know, it could be anything on the campus. So like they said with the DPW, it could be used over there to build a structure over there too, if you wanted to, but that was the main intent, to work against that mortgage, and we did use some of it to pay it down, plus we had advantages of rate reductions too.
Mr. Thomas?
So Superintendent Limbada, what is your suggestions to do with this overpayment? First off, this money that is in that fund, how much again is it?
It's about $2.6 million right now.
And what are we getting in interest in that?
Whatever Mr.
Whatever-
Guzak or,
Is this the
this is
1
part
or
of what he
2%?
invests.
No, this one's higher, I'd have to look it up. This one's higher, because it's out there for a longer period of time, so. But here again,
6, 4, 2, guess?
I'm not sure, but it's,
So what is your suggestion to do with the
mean,
excess funds?
You have a capital projects fund also, right, that's got over $2 million in it right now,
In addition to this one.
in addition to this one.
right.
So I don't know why
Can
we
you
need,
back up real quick? With that, our extra capital, would that, I've seen that, but where does, so if we did a new roof for the police, that would come out of which?
well, it could come out of either, but normally the repairs that we've done at the police department come out of our normal capital projects fund,
Our-
not out of
Right.
this, because this
Right.
was dedicated to that campus project.
Gotcha.
It was a campus with the idea that it would have been used to, you know, number one, pay back the bond costs.
And
is
we're
what
doing
was.
it automatically.
And so we're paying back the bond costs, it's just that we've been dedicating, at board's direction, we dedicate 0.7 mils every year, and it exceeds what we need to dedicate, and I think that there's much more pressing needs, including OPEB or pension debt, that I think have much bigger impact than sitting on this cash at $2.6 million, or trying to build up a reserve on the chance that we may or may not build a building in 2031. We would have time to bond that project and move it forward in 2031. I would much rather see us be, just to continue to aggressively go after our OPEB.
So
I just
you're
want to
only
finish my
talking the
point.
229.
Before someone jumps in, my point. It just finished my, and it's still, we're at, when we pay $1 to unfunded liability, it's worth $2.
Oh, it's.
You're
obviously
basically
there's a bigger
doubling our money,
liability, right.
so seems like that would be a no-brainer to use that money to pay off our.
Mr. Massey's had his hand up for a little while. here.
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
What I would like to see, I would like for the no, not the superintendent, I'd like for the treasurer to come back before we make a decision tonight, to come back and report out what is the investment like
Of that $2 million.
of this $2.6 million?
It's not gonna be that high, it's better.
No,
Mike,
no,
what- I know.
I didn't ask that. All I say, I wanted you to come back, Mr.
Okay,
Treasurer,
fine.
and report what you're getting.
For
That's
that
all I'd like to
2.6.
know.
Okay, and what I'd like, and so what you were, I just want to clarify what you're saying. The excess is 229, so you're still using part of the 0.7 to make the actual payments, but because our values have went up so much higher and our, buildings and everything else, it's just the excess of the 229 that you want to apply to OPEB, right?
Right, what I'm saying is, we don't need to make that distinction like in truth and taxation where we've been previously we're always saying, we're gonna collect, 4.9 mils for operating,
Right.
and 0.7 mils of that will be dedicated for the campus projects fund. We've made that statement every year. I think we left it out of this year's
Yeah,
truth
this
and
year we did not,
taxation because I
because-
wanted the
right.
board to have the option to consider. I mean, it's just going into our operating millage and it's getting
Right.
paid out of our operating millage. We still are gonna budget for the bond, principal, and
Right.
interest payments.
As long as it's,
Let's just stop holding the extra
Right.
$230,000 and putting it in a fund that we're not using when we have such a great opportunity to reduce our liabilities.
right, I agree that we could put that temporarily towards that OPEB, and then once that's under control, and once we know we're in that range where we're not under the radar screen like we've been, because with your new evaluation, it could be dropping down, and this extra 230 might be able to help us out for a couple of years to get us in a more comfortable spot. So I agree to that.
Mr. Mansour?
I was just saying that every little bit here is going to help us in terms
Right.
of reducing this OPEB, so that's a great potential use for this. But again, we're looking at other uses for funds as well, right? Because we just decided to up the road match by 120 grand. So you could say to yourself, okay, well, we'll take half of it to cover the increased match, and the other half we'll throw toward OPEB, and
Absolutely,
continue
and then
to-
we
Right.
can still put what we had planned in our budget
Yep.
towards OPEB instead of cutting that to do the road funding.
right,
Right.
yeah.
And
I like
this,
that.
and the money for the unfunded liability, this plus the matching money at the end of the year and such, would that get us low enough to get us off of the
hit list.
the hit list, the watch list?
I won't know that answer until we get our actual
It'll get us
evaluation
closer.
back. But, we were at 13%. We got a long way to go, man.
Right.
And I don't know how far we'll go. I think that we've made incredible changes. I know it's gonna have a big impact. But taking, if you wanna leave some in there and don't take the whole $2.6 million, you wanna keep some kind of fund balance in campus projects. But I think you could take $2 million of that and put it directly on OPEB out of that fund balance right now if the board directed us to do so. It's a lot of money to be sitting there, when we're trying to come up, don't forget, they turned down our waiver request. We have to create, an action plan, to correct it. This would go a long way towards being able to say, and we threw another $2 million out on top of it. We're gonna do another $1 million this year from our fund balance. That's a $3 million swing that we could have in 2018, which, if you look at that, when we do our next valuation, I mean, those are huge leaps and bounds. When you had a $31 million liability, we've been really aggressive going after it, but it was a $31 million liability before we started, just 3 years ago.
And that 3 million is basically worth 5.
It can be, I mean, the impact on what we do with it is.
That, you're never gonna get a better return on your money than that. Attorney Laddie, how do we do this? Do we do this in a motion form, or how does this work?
No, I think,
budget.
I think this is just a budget adjustment that
Right.
Mr. Limita can make in the budget that you're gonna be voting on in, the first week of December?
Oh,
So-
so you're looking for consent, correct?
Direction from the board to say that, yeah, you kind of agree with where we've gone, and then allow me to make the changes in the budget. We'll bring the budget back out to you as a revised copy, and it will show these changes in it. As far as the thing from the fund balance, that's just a direction from the board. At any time, you can direct us with this campus projects fund
Well, I'd
to-
like to make the recommendation.
to do a budget amendment,
Yeah.
transfer that, appropriate that money in, and allow us to pay it against OPEB.
Mr. Massey?
I'm not ready to move on this until the treasurer come back and tell us what the percentage of the investment, the return on the investment.
I don't know that we're gonna make it, I mean, we're gonna vote on the budget at the beginning of December, but
Yes.
I think right now, we're just trying to get consensus so Mr. Limita can go back and take a look at what he's comfortable with budgeting for that. We may have some recommendations individually, what we think that number should look like. I don't know, you know, I heard 2 million out there, Mr. Mansur.
So, yeah, let me just throw out something here for the board. I mean, we've talked about a lot of different projects we want to take on here. We have a whole list of future positioning things that are likely going to cost some money. We have a DDA that we're probably going to end up loaning some money to get started. So when you start to consider all those things, I'd like to kind of think about that whole $2.6 million. We got to save a portion of it to kind of do those other things.
And that portion
Well-
really can be done at any time. That's just gonna sit there until you guys direct it
Right.
to somewhere else. I think it's a great point. As far as the 0.7 mils, that will help us with this year's budget, you know, and I think that's the one that's probably more critical about making the change here. The fund balance itself, you guys can address at any point.
What you're asking for is us to give you, not, to change the directive of the past boards, to just stop leaving that money into
Right.
an escrow account.
Let's stop
basically.
dedicating to 0.7. Let's put the money that
To
we
use.
need in there to make our bond payments.
I'll
and
make the
let rest
recommendation
come
that
in.
you put it into the budget and have us take a look at it, and then we can vote on it. And that would do
Yeah.
that. You know, with going through and spending time with our treasurer Guzak and going through the investment, I'm sure what we're receiving is probably at the top 3.5%, Joe, and at the least probably 1.5%. Trust
Well,
me,
we'll find
Nancy.
that out, but I agree with Mr. Mansur that, you know, we've got a lot of projects.
Yep, exactly.
I would like to see, I know one of the things we bounced around, I'm not sure if it's been before the full board, but is some improved signage. I know we talked about our sign out front here, but I would like to see us look at a couple of projects where we actually put up monument-type signs at the entry areas to our township. So it could be on I-75 where Saginaw Street splits off with something "Welcome to Grand Blanc Township" that, you know, is very classy and is gonna be there for the next 50 to 100 years. Something maybe, I know that Ms. Lane has met with MTA as well as myself, and we've talked about putting one at Maple Road and Dort Highway on their property that they would be willing to take care of.
Yep, and that's one of the things that I think that now that we've got this in front of us, that we're starting to do a good job of leverage, because we don't want to spend this any more money than we need to create the image that we need. And so if we can partner with the MTA or whoever's on the corners here,
Right.
when the time is right, then we can leverage that quite a ways.
Right, and even the DDA.
Yeah, DDA.
know.
yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
let me make a positive statement here based on something Trustee Thomas said. We should be getting more than 3%. I know that for a fact, okay? I just want you to be, so I can put myself out front. We should be getting more than 3%. I know that for a fact, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I just
Thank
want to
you.
make a comment. Right now, the rates are going up, and right now, for almost 360 days, because we just placed that, it came in around 2.75. So I know this other one's going to be a year old, so it's going to be way below that. And right now, I can't get more than 2.75 on one bank. One was a little bit higher, but it depends on what you want to put it into. If you want to put it into stuff, this has to be liquid, because if it goes out too far, you can't do the stuff that you're talking about here. You have to be careful.
Mr. Treasurer, I understand that.
Oh, okay, good.
I just said.
I just
it
wanted
should
to
be
point
more
out
than
right now,
3%.
that's all I could get was
Okay.
275, okay?
Mr. Guzek's gonna get the information, and
Yes.
Mr. Lehman is
It
going
was
to
less
work
than
on.
275.
Mr. Limita, could you talk a little bit about the digitizing of the records, or how that's working out in operations?
Yeah, we were really hoping to be a little bit farther along than we are, but part of that is the software developers for OnBase actually have to, they have to customize things to work our way so that it'll automatically pick up those records, and so we have a lot of unique records within the township. So when they go into scan things, what you want to do is have much of the readily identifiable records as possible, so that when we start to scan, it knows which forms it's looking at or where those belong, and it will grab it and automatically categorize it. But we're not way behind. They're continuing to work on it. We just saw at this point by October that they would be picking up like all the building records and scanning those in and be ready to go. So we're a little bit behind, but I mean, when we're done, it's more about the finished product that we're going to have something that actually physically works for us. And when people start to submit documents, it will automatically send it where it needs to go. So, realistically, we're ready to go. We're going to have assessing and building, obviously, is first. DPW has already been working on scanning a lot of information in. I think that our goal, obviously, is that we've got every record in the township digitized and scanned in and accessible so that we can do searches on it. But it will be, I was optimistic that it would be by October. I think we're looking for that the first of the year.
So, I don't know, easements, legal documents, I don't know, I guess that's a clerk job. I don't know. Do we have all those in one particular place that's like in a fire safe room? Or like if I wanted to go and look up, I don't know, I imagine the minutes are already digitized, but in terms of past, I mean, the ordinances, we've got those obviously in a book, but any important records, I don't know, I know we probably can go down to the county and pull out what we don't have, but things like the deed, the question came up for the library. I don't know if we have a copy of the deed for that, or for buildings, or, personal property, any of those types of things.
That's more of a question for the clerk than it is for me. I mean, we've got, yeah, we should have all of our records in a fire safe room that's, all the deeds, our property ownership, those kind of things. I know that, in the past when I got here, we didn't have everything, but I don't want to answer for Kathy. I would let Kathy answer that question.
I don't think we have all the things you think we have. And
Really?
I know that the original minutes and everything are stored in the safe and things like that.
What safe? We have a safe
The
that's that
room,
big?
well, we referred to it as a safe because that's what initially it was, but it's the room behind the building and code enforcement now, where they have all the building things, and it's up on top shelves.
I guess, I mentioned this to Mr. Lemata earlier today, but I'm thinking, in terms of task force, that with the digitization of everything, that I'm wondering if it'd be beneficial for us to have a task force for record retention, if nothing else, to develop some policy on what types of things, and probably a lot of it's in statute in terms of what length of time, but I think we also need to make a list of what documents we have, or take an inventory of what we have and what we don't have, because I've looked at a few of the rooms that we have here, that here's some documents from this, here's some documents from that. And I don't know, with us getting together the records and digitizing them, I think it would be beneficial for us to take a look and maybe set a policy as to what we are keeping, what we don't have, what we need to have, and be able to get those types of things scanned in. And obviously Miss Lane, has a ton of stuff to do already, but I think it's important that we have all these important papers in one place. I mean, after we're gone, as board members, what have you, I don't want people to say, hey, where did all this stuff go? And right now, I'm not knowing where any of that stuff is, especially, and that's, with regard to the insurance, my concern too is we have a loss and we don't have the paperwork to prove ownership of personal property or real property. It really sets us back a little ways on making a claim sometimes. Mr. Mansour, or Massey?
Yes, I have a question for you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Who is responsible for keeping records?
The clerk, I believe, by statute, is that correct, Mr. Laddie?
That's correct.
So the clerk is in charge of all important papers, basically, and correspondence, that type of thing.
So the clerk should know where all the records are.
Well,
We have
and
a changeover.
we change clerks, and that's why I want to make sure that we have it all in one place, and when it's digitized, it's obviously going to be much more secure because it
Can't
can
be
have several
shredded.
copies. But I don't know, any thoughts on?
I'll sit on that task force with Clerk Lane if she's going to be on that task force, which I assume she will.
I'll sit
Yeah.
on the task
Does
force.
anybody want to talk to Lonnie?
Okay. All right, so Ms. Lane, would that be something,
We'll take
Good
it
deal.
over if you
Okay.
give me until after the November 6th election.
we're hoping to have it completed by then.
Oh, I figured you did. I know you are. When
No,
you wanna
okay.
move, you wanna move.
Okay, so we'll do that.
Just a
Mr.
suggestion,
Linda?
I think maybe, you know, we can all help Clerk Lane, but I think it would start with an inventory of what you currently have, and then we have to do, it's about getting one room that, you know, you have a room now, Kathy, that, you know, we just need to make sure that we get all of the, whether we have to pull it from DPW, building, planning, my files, and we just start putting together the file that holds all of the original copies of easements or deeds or, you know, any of those records, and we build one file cabinet. But I think it needs to start with an inventory of what we have in our hands right now, and then if there are some things that we need to create from a historical perspective, like I said, you said earlier, I think we can get from the county a lot of the records if we don't have them, including, you know, I'm sure David can assist in all of that, but I think from a task force standpoint, start with an inventory of what you have, and then we start looking for what we need. Kathy said there were some files still out, and I asked Jeff one day about our files, and we still had boxes out in the storage, out in the garage, so I want to make sure from a records retention standpoint, a lot of this stuff can never be destroyed. We just need to make sure that we're following the record retention policy with all of those.
And to make sure that other departments know what that policy is. I mean, if we've got to keep things in building department forever, we need to know that. You know, I'm not sure if some of the laws have changed, because I know they were looking at changing some of the laws with regard to building plans, whether or not you could digitize them and ditch the paper copy. But there's, you know, I've heard of people having some huge storage areas just of nothing but building plans in some municipalities, and costing a fortune to store those types of things. So, you know, and maybe some things have changed, but we can consult with Mr. Laddie on what those statutes state.
Sure.
But I think it's important that we let our departments know too. I mean, the police, fire, everybody has records, and we need to figure out what the process is going to be to get those records that may have been stuck in a file in the past, how they get to Miss Lane and how they get scanned and where they're kept. The actual paper copy is kept, that's secure from, you know, whenever there's a change in clerk or boards, or even department heads. Well, thank you, Mr. Thomas and Mr. Massey for, Ms. Lane, for serving on that. I think that'll help us with our digitization too, and making sure our important records are on there. Anything else under operations, Mr. Limita, that you want to talk about with budget?
That's all I had.
Yeah, Mr. Massey?
So, the title under the operational issues here was consider adjustments to the proposed general fund and special revenue budgets. I think we spent a little bit of time with the general fund before on previous sessions here. Is there anything in the special revenue that a big change, or?
Nothing that I'm recommending. I put it in there because you guys have had the opportunity to review everything. I didn't know if there was anything that got flagged, so rather than just put general fund, I put general fund and special revenue funds, to give you guys the opportunity, if there's something else about your conversations that you've had in your budget review that you'd like to make a change, this would be an appropriate time. And we can revise the copy, you know, many times before we actually approve it, but I wanted to at least get some of the changes in there and get the revisions started in the 2019 budget.
Just, this is, I think it connects to the campus project funding that was before. In the proposal here this year, we had, and I'm looking at page 9 of 11 in the package, but we had dedicated about $365,000 basically to bond repayment. And this year, it looks like we're budgeting $460,000. Is that?
You'd have to show me where you're looking at again.
It's in the, I'm sorry, it's in the special revenue funds, September 1st. It's under the tab that says municipal campus project.
Yep.
It's it's about 4 lines from the bottom. Debt bond principal payment. In the white,
It's
in
in
the
the
white.
white one.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that account number 991.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, yep, so,
We can't overpay, we can't pay more on the bonds than we owe, because we just had that discussion earlier.
Right, you
we can't, but
So-
that amortization schedule
Right.
Yep.
changes, and so that's just following the amortization schedule that we received.
Okay, so this just means they're paying more toward the principal than we.
Right,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the schedule does go up,
Okay,
so
okay,
the last few years are really huge.
all right. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Any other questions on, before we move on? Okay. Anything with Parks and Rec that, I think, we were gonna have a discussion this evening with regard to, task force meeting, but I think we're going to postpone, we're postponing that, and we're gonna take a
Rose
look.
presenting it.
What's that, you were prepared to present?
No, Rose presenting it, aren't you?
No, I'm not.
No.
Lonnie is.
Lonnie is, but we're going to try and see, I don't know if everybody is amenable to possibly having a work session to actually walk through. I know we set up a schedule when Ms. Radwan helped facilitate that, and I'll email that out to everybody, but
I think
we're
what the-
kind of on track.
I think what the task force was gonna recommend to the board is if we held off on doing a work session to see if the board, just to give our overview first, and then see if the board likes the wave that we're gonna make a proposal, and then if they do, then maybe we could do a special work session with Mrs. Bradwan.
Well, I think it'll meld together, but let me take a look at what that schedule was, but I
Well,
think we can do both.
we're about 3 weeks ahead of schedule right now. We're
Okay.
doing very well on that, but we'd like to make the presentation at the next board meeting. If that's acceptable, can we get that on the agenda?
Well, let's take a look, let me take a look at the schedule for the, we'll have Parks and Rec on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, so
Remember,
we'll
'cause
do
we
our
want-
pres-
But just a matter of whether or not we have a meeting in between there to go over it a little bit further.
Okay.
So,
Did
and
you
if
wanna
everybody can't
meet
make
with
it,
the township? Did you wanna meet with the task force, or just?
yes, but
Okay.
let me take a look at what we put together as far as the schedule with Ms. Radwan to see what we said we wanted to accomplish by when. I think we're on target, I believe.
And we had for the October 23rd meeting that the task would be the board dialogue, already shared vision for Parks and Recreation and for the ongoing partnership. So when you looked at, we started from September 11th and worked it up to this October 23rd meeting, it was gonna be the detail would be, is it the township alone, is it the township, city, school district continuing, and then what the shared vision is for how we move forward. So I think we're on track. If Trustee Adkins is here to do his presentation this evening, I think that would have kept you right exactly where you wanted to be as far as still trying to get it done by the December
year.
deadline.
Okay. Streets and roads, Ms. Lane?
Dan Potter, Jeff Sears, and the committee met, and we were going to have a meeting last week, but Mr. Sears is still working on developing a list of all of the subdivisions that are still on wells. Years ago, in the 70s, the township went out for bonds and put all the sanitary sewer in. And then in the 80s, we went out for bonds and put in the water lines, but the policy has always been we wouldn't go into a subdivision with wells unless it was a special assessment district. So we want to know, first of all, how many subdivisions are out there that are still on wells so that they can do cost projections and things like that. So we're looking at it, and when Mr. Sears has that done, we'll meet again.
Okay, thank you. With regard to Technology Village, I guess the DDA kind of fits in there, and we're in the midst of scheduling a meeting for our first meeting of our board, and we're hoping to do that in the next 2 weeks. We have emails out to all of them, and we're just putting the dates together that seem to work for the most people. So if there's anything more to report on that right now. There's a lot of interest, and in what we're going to be doing there. Moving down the list, anything planning and zoning, Mr. Mansur?
So just the business attractiveness, attract restaurants thing. So hearing from too many of our residents that they're taking trips outside of our area for alternative restaurants. So I'm going to use those people who are making the comments to recruit for our to help support our initiative here, our task force. So just to let you know, I'm in recruiting mode now.
Okay. And I think our master plan too
Yep.
will take their input towards that as well.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think, you know, we want to share that information with the DDA too, so that when they're looking at incentives that they want to offer to businesses.
Good point. Thank you.
Anything with regard to planning commission? Okay. Anything with regard to Perry, Mr. Guzak, or Mr. Thomas?
Oh, Earl can take this one.
Well, I think they did report that they, on the Perry House, that they had that project, but that was all discussed at the last meeting, as far as having they had that petting zoo out there. Minutes had also indicated that they actually gave away free hot dogs. Usually it was donations, but at this time they didn't have donations. They had the free hot dogs. That was recapped in their minutes, and so bad weather, they had a turnout.
Director Lloyd has been meeting with them, and I also, you just reappointed some people to the Historic Commission.
A couple board meetings ago.
Yeah, and Director Lloyd had a meeting with them last week or the week prior. They're working on their RFPs and such for the floor. But maybe the three of us need to maybe have a meeting with Director Lloyd next week. That works for your schedule.
So
Sure.
I have a question to the folks that are on this. The Perry Homestead and Nature Trails, what is the scope of the nature trails? Are they just the one that's on that farmstead area, or do they extend to other, they
No.
wouldn't extend to other places?
No, the nature trails, I know that there's 3 Eagle projects that are out there right now where they're gonna go through and they're gonna identify some type of, all the different vegetation out there. And then another of the Eagle Scouts is gonna do something with the animals out there. That's 2 of the projects. One, side note, really neat Eagle project that I know Scott's doing something with, I'm sorry, Supervisor Bennett's doing something with, is that they put out some beautiful new benches, and just, Paula Schmidt's gonna be actually doing an article on it. Just, so if you have an opportunity to go out there and look at the benches and the seats and the chairs that he made out of 250-year-old barn wood that was donated to him to build. But that's what that nature trail is. And it's supposed to be in conjunction with the schools. The Grand Blanc School District's working on those too.
And, yeah, I don't know. I know you originally had some safety concern with those trails. I don't know if that's been looked at or not, but that might be something too that we need to look at a little bit closer. Okay,
May I
yes.
ask, Mr. Thomas, are they, or this board is, I don't know if Mr. Lemata is looking at what's going to be the time frame on the barn?
Hasn't that been brought to me? I'm sure it's been brought to Superintendent.
I think they're working on ideas for that, and that's probably a project that
About right where it's
hopefully,
at.
so I think in my discussion informally with them, that's on their list to look at.
Okay.
So, and I think, I don't know, Mr. Mansour had some questions with regard to water and sewer rates and what have you, and I think
City.
we responded back, and that copy went to all board members. So I just encourage you to take a look. Mr. Mansour asked some very good questions, and I encourage our board to look at that, because how we set those, you know, cost and making sure that we cover cost is critical. So, one thing that I wish I didn't have to bring up, but I heard late today, some concern from some individuals with regard to potential bias in our clerk's office. And it disturbed me to the point where I thought I better bring it to the board. I think everybody's probably aware that email can't be used for promoting any particular candidate, but some individuals came to me with a concern that we were endorsing particular candidates. And I told them that no, the township, and if me personally, if I endorse somebody, I can't do it on behalf of the township. If I'm going to do something like that, I need to do it away from here. In fact, I can't even, I make it my policy, and I believe it's probably state statute that I can't be conducting political activities out of my office, and nor can anybody else, as far as political contributions or meeting over political issues here in this building. But that concern was brought to me today, and it was rather disturbing that they would think that we might have some bias there.
No bias
Mr.
on
Chair,
it.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, if an employee of the township sends out an email, is the superintendent responsible for the employee sending out an email?
Well,
To campaign for
employees,
candidates?
I'm not sure where employees fit into the picture, but in this case, it was an email sent out by our clerk's office promoting a particular candidate.
Okay, hold on, time out. So, let's get back to your first statement.
Yes.
So you're saying that you can't endorse that you wouldn't endorse somebody saying Scott Bennett, supervisor, Grand Blanc Township?
I can't use township resources to
Right.
do that.
Can I
Mr.
just
Laddie?
clarify that? There's a statute that says that no township resource, computers, time, phones, stamps, any aspect of township resource can't be used for any campaign or any ballot question.
Yeah, that's against the law.
Correct. I think.
Well, I said, hey, I don't believe that's occurring, and so they handed me an email that actually went out by our clerk's office, and it was promoting an event when I was at last Friday for Jocelyn Benson at the UAW hall with State Democratic leader Jim Ananick and County Clerk John Gleason, and they gave me the email that came from our clerk's office.
Mr. Gleason called me and asked me to do that late on Friday, and I inadvertently did it, and I apologize. But I am not endorsing any candidates, and I don't happen to be, so.
Hold on a sec, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
So we sent out an email to our residents
No,
to, what did we,
Well, I mean, whenever you send out an email, it can get forwarded. In
well,
this
you have
case,
to
a
use,
resident.
like I don't send, if I want to send an email, I use my own personal,
Right.
account. I don't use my
May I see
township
that
account.
email, please?
Correct, and my understanding is, and Supervisor Bennett shared this information with me just.
Who did? I'm sorry.
Supervisor Bennett, and then I actually spoke with Ms. Lane before the meeting. I saw the email. It looks like arguably some township resource was used to send out an email to, not township residents, but just to, it looked to me like other clerks or other political people, other political representatives or elected officials. It wasn't a mass email.
However, it got forwarded.
It got, but anyway, at any rate, it does seem arguably to be a violation of that tenet that we don't use any township resource, township email, township computer, to send out anything relating to a
You
campaign.
can't use state,
Government owned.
yeah, Attorney General Schuette just got sanctioned for doing this and using his time and his resources and a government computer in
Well, I think what it
doing the
was
same
is
thing.
notary. He had some employees notarize a document, which I
And
think,
Graham and Burton just went through this, and
well, that's, you make a good point, Mr. Thomas, because my concern is that, you know, you mentioned Burton. When the issue comes up, it isn't, hey, that clerk in Burton did. It's Burton that gets the bad
But-
name.
But, Mr. Chair, here's one thing I do not understand. And I would like for, do you mind explaining this to me, Clerk Lane? I heard what you...
Mr. Gleason
No,
called.
no. I have a question for you.
Oh,
My question is, you use the word inadvertently a lot. I know the meaning of the word, okay? But I don't understand how you can send out something inadvertently. It has Grand Blanc Township, Emory all over it, okay? It has Kathy Lang Township Clerk,
right.
okay? 185th. Okay. Now, I can understand somebody inadvertently pushing the wrong key, clicking on the wrong whatever, okay? But I cannot understand with all of this information on this, let me call it the letterhead, that you inadvertently sent this out. You had to do this intentionally.
she
Mr.
inadvertently
Gleason
goes
called
against
me.
the law.
Mr. Gleason called me and asked me to let the clerks know that the candidate was going to be there so that they could come and ask her questions.
So,
And so
okay,
that's
let me
what
ask
I
you,
did,
let me ask you a
and I
question.
let it go.
So someone calls me, I want to get this right. So someone calls me and say, you trustee Joe Massey, I would like for you to send this information out. So I go to my computer, to a candidate, I go to my computer, and I use the email address of the township, and I can campaign by using the email of the township. So everybody's saying that the township is endorsing this candidate. That's what
That's the
people
concern,
are saying.
exactly. That's exactly the concern.
Okay, well, I am not.
Now, let me say this, Clerk Lane. If I did that, what would you say? You would be all over me. You would tell me I should know better. I should be a recall. You would be saying all of those nasty things.
I don't think so, Mr. Massey.
Yes, you would, because you said things to me that had nothing to do with you even mentioned here in this building. So that's why this is very important.
Okay,
So that you could be fined for that.
okay.
Well, and I'm not sure where it's going, but they did mention that they were going to file a complaint.
With the state police,
I'm not sure who the proper authority is. Probably the election commission.
goes to the state police.
But the problem with email is that things get forwarded, you know, and I noticed that Mr. Gleason sent it to you from his private email address, not from his from his county email address. And maybe he meant as a favor for you to send it out on your personal email address to promote her. But when you use township resources, and I know, you know, people are, well, how much does it cost us to send out an email? Well, it's using the name of the township, and then things get forwarded from there. So I can send out a joke to 20 people, and then that gets forwarded, and that joke on the bottom of it says it was sent by Scott Bennett, Grand Blanc Township Supervisor. If it's an unseemly joke, now it comes back on the township. You see what kind of stuff that township's sending out? So it's not just political endorsements, it's using township resources to, and basically endorsing it, so.
But these were sent to other
Clerk?
clerks. This was sent to every single clerk in the, all over, and who's thanks auntie?
Well, we'll let Ms.
That happens to be a long-term relationship that Mr. Gleason and I have because of my husband.
Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, Supervisor Bennett, so I mean, it's an important topic to bring to the board, and I think that a number of people here had an opportunity to express their concerns on it. I mean, I'm not sure that we can take this any further here, but I think it's an excellent reminder to all of us that we have, responsibilities to our, as elected officials, and there's boundaries that we have to be aware of, and we are not to cross them. So, sorry that this is an individual case that brings this up, but I mean, it's a good reminder to all of us.
Well, and especially during election time, people, already are questioning the integrity of elections. I mean, we have a federal investigation that's been going on for 2 years now over the integrity of our national election. I just hate to see people calling into question the integrity of ours. I mean, I know clerks, have to run as independent Republican or Democrat, but we want our clerks and our clerk department to run as if party doesn't matter.
But let me ask you a question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
How many times does the same board member have to defend him or herself by saying inadvertently?
Well, I'm going to let that one be a question that I guess we all have to ask ourselves. But bottom line is, I wanted to bring it to the board's attention that, especially during this time frame, be careful how you use township resources, that they can't be used to promote any particular candidate. We can't use our facilities for any of that. So,
Let me ask the attorney a question. Can you be fined for doing that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's technically a misdemeanor. Now that issue would be, that issue would be considered by a county prosecutor if there was a complaint made, if there was some sort of investigation of criminal activity that would be conducted at the county level. Honestly, I haven't seen this kind of violation pursued in that way, but whether or not it's pursued in that way, it does have political consequences out in the community, but also to the board and also to the individual. And so we want to make sure that we don't engage in this behavior. It isn't the crime of the century, but it's something that is directly contrary to the law, and that we want to make sure as a township as a whole that nobody engages in this kind of activity. And as far as what happens from this point on with this issue or others, then that would be in the hands of the county officials. And I think we just need to, again, we need to make sure that this doesn't happen at any level in this building.
Clerk Lane, you thought you were sending it from your personal email on your computer.
I was doing something, just to say that that's going out for a friend. And,
But you didn't intentionally use your township email, did you? You intentionally?
It was,
I think we
I
want to
apologize, I would
Yeah.
hope we can end it.
I would,
Mr.
in
Mansour?
speaking, in ending it, I would make a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
I'll second that. Get out a little early. Good job.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.